We are now 2 weeks into the Reign of Jafar metagame, and we have seen so many huge tournaments over this last weekend that I can't wait to dig into with you. And we're also going to be looking at some tournament results using the 3-deck constructed format, which is of course what's going to be used at Disney Lorcana World. So lots to look at. Let's dive right in. Up first, as always, we have the meta breakdown, and for the second week in a row for the Reign of Jafar, and probably the 4th or 5th week now, overall, Steel Song is the most represented deck across all of the different tournaments. And as you would expect, as Steel Song does better, we see a lot more Ruby Sapphire control decks showing up. It is still not the best matchup for Steel Song, but has still been quite improved a lot by the lack of Hiram, but also the fact that Ruby Sapphire didn't really get that many new toys to play with this set. So we'll have to see. I don't think Ruby Sapphire is the threat to Steel Song that it once was, and because of that, Steel Song just running away really in this metagame. Third place, for the second week in a row, we see Amber Steel aggro decks. This really being a case of a card like Rhino just being so powerful in the metagame at the moment that it's really helping propel a deck like that, as well as the new lady. After that, in 4th place, we have Blurple, a deck that is still doing really well, actually putting up a winning tournament result this week, so that's going to be fun to look at. Discard falling off a little bit, but I do know that there were a lot more Emerald Steel decks making top 4 than were represented across the whole metagame. And then after that, we see just a whole wave of Amethyst Steel, we see Amethyst Emerald, both the discard and the bounce versions. We see Amethyst Ruby, and then Chernadog also making an appearance this week. But I think the most telling thing about this data is that those other decks that we saw a lot of in the first week as people were testing things out, and as we saw during set championship season, is slowly dropping off as people kind of come together around certain decks that are doing better in the metagame. But as always, will be very interesting to see how this develops over the coming weeks. Up first, before we look at the actual tournaments, I wanted to share this, which was the top 8 results from that triple deck constructed tournament that I was talking about. This was run by World Class Cards, and they had an event on both the Saturday and the Sunday. And I just thought it'd be really interesting to look at the data here. So for those of you who aren't aware of what the triple deck constructed format is, every player has to bring 3 decks, and each of those decks has to represent 2 ink colors. So then each of those 3 decks represents all of the different ink pairings. So very, very fun format. And the way it works is when you sit down across from your opponent, you're told what their decks are, they're told what your decks are, and then each of you can choose to then ban a deck, and then you play with the other 2 decks in the best of 3 format that we're used to. But what's very fun about this, and what I think it was really highlighted through this tournament, is just the kind of the meta strategy on top of that. Like, a lot of players were saying they just automatically ban the Steel deck because Steel can shut down a lot of strategies, especially in the early to the mid game. So getting rid of Steel allows for other different decks to kind of show up. And then in the final of this tournament, it's actually a best of 5. No decks are banned, and you just have to win a game with each of your 3 decks. So really, really fun format. As I said, this was organized by World Class Cards, but you can check out the 20 Law Pro Twitch if you want to see any gameplay. Honestly, some of the most fun Lorcana I've had the chance to watch, just seeing so many different strategies. It's worth saying, unfortunately, these deck lists aren't being made public at the moment because this is all helping players prepare for Worlds. So we can't actually do too much of a breakdown, but of course some of these decks only work in this format when you're able to ban your worst matchup, essentially. And then in terms of the combination of inks that players were choosing, so the most represented was the Amethyst Steel, Amber Emerald, and Ruby Sapphire decks. So 3 players brought that combination, and that was actually the deck that took first place. But after that, there was a lot of variety. This is actually the results from the Saturday event. The Sunday event had even more of a spread across the different decks. So definitely check it out. Just one that I wanted to highlight before we talk about the rest. And in terms of the tournaments that we are looking at for just regular single deck constructed, we're looking at 5 really big events that all happened over this weekend. The first one is Ludofest in France, which was a 286 player event. Then Inc in the United States, which was a 128 player event. Lorcana 5K also in the US, which was 113 players. Disney Lorcana Quest Tour 4, hosted in Poland with 108 players. And the 4K Enchanted Showdown in Spain with 94 players. So huge tournaments. We're going to start off with Ludofest, and actually first and second place was both taken by Amethyst Emerald. So it was a mirror match in the finals, which was really fun to watch. And then Ruby Sapphire came in third. And in terms of the top 8, a lot of variety there. So 2 decks running the Amethyst Emerald, 2 decks running Blurple, and then a nice spread across the other 4 places. Similar in Inc, the first place was taken by Kurt Spice with a Dwarf's Mine Amber Steel Aggro. list. Kurt Spice, a very, very good player. So in this tournament, Amber Steel was the most represented deck, and then after that, quite a nice spread across the other 5 places. The Lorcana 5 gear was also taken by an aggro Amber Steel deck. The Rhino, the lady, really putting in a lot of work in these tournaments. Second place with Amethyst Emerald discard, and then third place was Blurple. Again, very nice, diverse, healthy top 8. The Lorcana Quest Tour was taken down by Amethyst Steel, and then both Steel Song and Aggro Steel Song were in second and third place. And yeah, 3 Amber Steel decks in the top 8 here. So great job to Amethyst Steel being able to take this one down. I know it isn't the easiest matchup for them in Amber Steel. And then in the 5th tournament, that was the 4K Enchanted Showdown. In that case, it was Blurple that took down the event with Amethyst Emerald in second and Ruby Sapphire in third. And actually 4 out of the 8 decks were Ruby Sapphire. We see only 1 Steel deck, which was Amethyst Steel, no Amber decks. And yeah, I'm glad I wasn't playing in this top 8 because yeah, that's a scary amount of Ruby Sapphire, but proving that even if you don't get a bunch of new cards or any new cards in a lot of these cases, it's still a deck that can do really well. With that said, let's start looking at some deck lists. So this is the first place winner from the Ludofest, William Lafleur, with Amethyst Emerald discards. A deck list that had been doing really well in the previous set and continuing to do well. We see a whole murder of Diablos there, 10 Diablos, allowing you to get that shift Diablo, because that is such a huge advantage for you in a match, in any matchup basically, especially when you've got your tools like Ursula to protect your Diablo and things like that. As we pointed out last week, the main new additions to this deck really pull the lever and wrong lever. A lot of Amethyst Emerald decks tending to run these actions right now because A, they have really good synergy with Diablo, but it also just gives this deck more removal, more ways to kind of disrupt your opponent, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. 1 copy of It Calls Me. This is a 1-cost song that lets you draw a card, but also lets you shuffle 3 cards from your opponent's discard into their deck. Very good in the mirror match if your opponent has pulled the lever in their discard, because you can shuffle it into their deck, which reduces the power of wrong lever. Also very good into Ruby Sapphire matchups as well. Good into a lot of matchups these days, even against like Amber, who want to be bringing their Lilo back out of the discard. Then this will help shut that down. So very, very good list, obviously doing really well. And the second place list was very similar to this one. It was both players, I believe, are from the same competitive team, so obviously workshopped and worked on these decks together. And yeah, still doing really well. And we know also Spessy was playing in an event in I want to say Norway. Took second place with a similar looking list as well. But then if you want something slightly more different, this is Kolpos's second place list from the Inc Invitational. Also Amethyst Emerald, but not featuring the same kind of discard package. We don't see Diablo in this list. This is more the tempo or the bounce list, looking to disrupt your opponent through things like Loyal Tiberius Rogue, but also the brand new card Louis, who is just such a good card in the 3-cost slot, being able to give your opponent Reckless, which means often your opponent's character will just have to slam into him. And then also has other disruption in the form of Ursula Sea Witch Queen, a card that hasn't really seen that much play recently, but with the amount of Amber Steel songs and just Steel songs in general in the metagame, it's good to have something like this that can kind of slow your opponent down a little bit. And of course, you've got the Ursula shift target for that as well. And then 2 copies of They Never Come Back. So this is an action that allows you to prevent up to 2 characters readying at the start of their next turn. So really just looking to slow your opponent down with all of the early aggression in the form of Curse Merfolk and Pegasus. Really, you're just going to want to kind of rush to the finish line with those, disrupting your opponent with your other characters to slow them down as you go. So a great list, again, if you want something a little bit different from your Amethyst Emerald. Next, we're going to go over to Amber Steel, who may just be becoming the boogeyman in the metagame at the moment, doing super well, and a lot of Amber Steel showing up. This is Kurt Spice's first place winning list from the Inc Invitational, and this is the more aggro list, using the 7 Dwarfs Mine, and because of that we see the Happies and we see the Docks in this list. But as I mentioned at the top of the video, it's really 2 cards that are just helping this deck really become super powerful this set. The first one being the Rhino package. It's great in Steel Song, but it's also great in a deck like this because a 4/3 Rhino on turn 2 who quests for 2 and has that resist 2 just means he is very, very difficult to get off the board for your opponent. He's just going to quest turn after turn in most cases. So that's definitely something you're going to want to set up. And then we also have the 4 copies of Lady as well. Lady allowing you to play a character 2 cost or less to the board. So you can play Lady and drop a Piglet. If you're running out of cards, you can drop a Dock to refill your hand. So there's a lot of different ways to play this. A super fun deck to play if you haven't tried it out. I definitely recommend it. And yeah, just great job to Kurt for taking down this event. Next up, we have another Amber Steel aggro list here from BS Chat. Also took first place, this time at the Lorcana 5k, and looking a lot like the previous list we looked at. The big difference here is the removal of the locations, instead favoring those 4 copies of Pluto in this list as a different way to protect your characters. Pluto, just a very, very good card, has the natural synergy with things like Rapunzel, and just allow your characters to quest for as much as possible. So very good list then. Great job to BS Chat. And then for the Steel Song enjoyers, we have this second place list from the Disney Lorcana Quest Tour number 4 from J4 Cub. I'm guessing Jacob. And yet looking a lot like the Amber Steel Song list we saw last week, of course, with that Rhino package in there, replacing the shift package of either the Robin Hood or the Queen, just showing how powerful these cards are. And of course, the game plan with a deck like this is really to set up your singer, either your Cinderella or your Rhino, and then shifting him on turn 2, and then singing those songs to control the board whilst building up your own. 2 copies of Daisy Duck. If you're expecting more control decks like Ruby Sapphire, then Daisy Duck, a very, very good card to include. We've got 1 copy of Gaston, another card that's good into Ruby matchups just because he's a little bit harder to remove. And then we're also seeing 1 copy of Darling Deer in this deck. This is a character that when she's played, give chosen character +2 lore. So if you just need that little bit of extra lore to get over the finish line, then that's what Darling Deer is there to do for you. And then the next Amber Steel list is another Amber Steel songs from Nathan Shackles that took 5th place at the Inc Invitational. And another list looking similar insofar as that it's got the Rhino package, it's got your Cinderella. But instead of the Daisy Ducks, this play is going for a little bit more of a mid-range strategy, including 2 copies of Namari, a card that a lot of people have been really excited about this set. I don't think people have really cracked the code on Namari, but still a really great way to help you filter through your deck. In a deck like Amber Steel Songs, finding your whole new world is so critical, so Namari is going to enable that, as well as being able to sing it. And then she is difficult to get off the board because of that 5 willpower, but then also that strength that's increasing with all of the cards in your discard pile. And also 2 copies of Grab Your Swords. Grab Your Swords, I think, doing quite well in the current meta with all of the aggressive decks like the Cherno Dog decks, the Amber Steel aggro lists, but also something like Emerald Steel, where Prince John is not going to be exerting. Grab Your Swords will enable you to get around those, and you have plenty of 5-cost singers able to sing that as well. So yep, great looking list here from Nathan. And then next up, we have this first place winning list from the 4K Enchanted Showdown. This is Luca Piero with Amethyst Sapphire Blurple. And the first thing to say is great job, Luca, just having such a consistent deck. Every card is a 4 of. There are already 8 uninkables in this deck, so this is going to just flow so smoothly. And a deck list that really is just doubling down on all of the really good things that Amethyst Sapphire wants to do. We see the 4 copies of Monstro in there. A lot of lists running maybe 2 or 3. Running the full 4 copies does enable and ensure that you find him, because Monstro really does help you in that mid to late game to control the board and then hopefully close out the game yourself. Also nice to see 4 goats making their way back into this list. A lot of Amethyst Sapphire lists are cutting the goats, just kind of looking to close the game with questing, but I do think having the goats there just gives you a little bit of extra reach, especially when you can recur them with something like Madam Mim Fox as well. So yeah, great list from Luca, and again, great job on all of the 4-ofs. And now the next deck list, which we have from A Wilp, took 3rd place at the Lorcana 5k. A lot of the similar cards using the 4-ofs, but with a little bit of spice mixed in. So we see 3 copies of Kida, the 4-cost 3/3 questing for 1 with Ward, which is always important in a very steel heavy metagame. And also she has the ability that allows her to exert. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 into your inkwell, and then put 1 back onto the top of the deck. Great way to help you gain some additional ink without having to sacrifice cards from your hand, especially when you're running Monster in this deck and you're going to be potentially discarding quite a lot of cards in order to enable his ability. Then having something like Kida just means that you can not have to sacrifice the cards in your hand in order to gain ink. And speaking of card draw, this deck list is also running 3 copies of Anna Magical Mission. This is a card that if you have a character named Elsa in play, when she quests, you can draw a card. because of course you're running the 4 copies of Elsa the Fifth Spirit in a list like this, then having that Anna could in most cases offer you some additional card draw. Elsa is a difficult character to get off the board, but then Anna also has support, which is going to allow her to give a little bit of extra strength to some of your other characters, which can help in matchups where you're dealing with locations, or even just big bodies you want to get out of the way. Turning Tipo into a 4 strength character can be really powerful. And of course, 1 copy of Ratigan in there as well. A card that we thought had some potential, and I think in an Amethyst Sapphire list is probably where he has the most potential, because you'll be able to get to him a lot sooner in order to play him. And also I think there's the nice synergy there with Gier as well, because she's going to be allowing you to ink from your deck. It means that even if you're running out of cards in your hand, you don't need to banish Ratigan with that second ability. Another great looking list here, and showing that there is definitely room to still explore in Amethyst Sapphire. And then the final first place list from the tournaments we were looking at, this is the first place list from the Disney Lorcana Quest Tour number 4. This is Amethyst Steel from Bonanza, and it's a list that's definitely building on the solid core that this deck has been establishing over the previous few sets, and really a list like this looking to do what Amethyst Steel does, which is a little bit of that early game aggression with your 1-cost characters that can all replace themselves, your Mr. Smee as well, and then getting into that mid to late game, using your Genie essentially to kind of speed it toward the law and locking your opponent out with a card like Pete. And then you've also got the Merlin Goats in there as well, just to help you close the game if you lose that board control. One fun thing in this list is we do see the Madam Mim Elephant, a 3/7 questing for 1, very good stats, and allows you to move that damage around. When you've got a character like Smee who's going to be taking damage, then obviously a really good target for that. You've also got some really big bodies like the Iago, so if you're able to move the damage off him, then he just sticks around a little bit longer. So fun looking list, and doing really well to take that first place. And nice to see Madam Mim Elephant. We thought this card would be great, and she hasn't really been putting up that many good performances. And next is the 5th place list from Tony Ruiz, and it is a very similar looking list. We do have 2 copies of the White Rose in there, giving a little bit of extra lore along with the Merlin Goat. The Let the Storm Rage On has been replaced by the Fire the Cannons, which is a very efficient way of dealing with something like Diablo if you're expecting a lot of Diablos, which I think you probably should in the current metagame. But then also 2 copies of Pinocchio Strings Attached, a card that allows you to draw a card every time you ready him. As a 0/4, he can be quite sticky to the board, so hopefully he is able to stick around long enough for you to be able to get a card off him. But of course, there are so many evasive characters in the metagame at the moment. I'm not sure how long he will stick around. I don't know if I'm that convinced by his place in the current metagame, but a card that I do really love. The art on it is amazing, and yeah, obviously did really well for Tony in this event. I'd love actually to watch some of his games to see if Pinocchio did anything or if he was just ink in most cases. And then the last deck list we're looking at from Amethyst Steel is the 6th place deck list at the Lorcana 5K from Jacob Badell, and Jacob actually was the one who sent us over this tournament, so thank you so much to him. And yeah, I just wanted to take a quick look at his list as well, and Jacob's list not including any cards from set 8. Set 7 did give a lot of support to this deck, and we're seeing that in the form of things like Helga Sinclair. Such a good card, again very difficult to remove. The 4 willpower is just so tricky for a lot of decks to deal with. The 3 copies of Giant Cobra doing a similar function to the White Rose, and is a card that can be brought back as well with your Mims, Snakes and Foxes. And then after that, all of the good stuff. So great job to Jacob for doing so well at this tournament. And before we move on to the next deck, including some really spicy ones, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors of today's video, Heavy Play. Heavy Play have their Equip Mag system, which allows you to connect your deck box to your dice box and your playmat, all with the power of magnets. Makes it super easy to switch between tables when you play. They also have their curved sleeves with curved corners, which mean you'll never have a card upside down in your deck again. If you want to get your hands on any Heavy Play products and support us out here at Inkborn Heroes, you can visit them at heavyplay.com and use the discount code Inkborn10 for 10% off at checkout. So thank you so much to Heavy Play for sponsoring this video, and I promised you some spicy decks, so let's start off with this one. This is an Emerald Sapphire deck from Bartosz ZD, who took 4th place at the Disney Lorcana Quest Tour number 4. Interestingly enough, Emerald Sapphire did do quite well at the Triple Deck Constructor tournament as well, showing that this is an ink combination that can do well, particularly if you're able to ban steel decks from those matchups. So this is a really interesting deck. It's a deck that's really going to be looking to disrupt your opponent with things like Lyle Tiberius Rock, things like Rapunzel, preventing your opponent being able to get lore whilst you're essentially gaining ink as quickly as you can, returning their characters to hand again just to disrupt them, all the while building up to your 7 ink turn when you can play Bend to My Will, discard all of your opponent's cards, and then close the game from there. We also have 4 copies of Clarabelle. Oftentimes you'll end up playing Clarabelle whilst your opponent has a bunch of cards because of all the characters you've returned. Draw a load with Clarabelle, and then on your next turn, discard all of the cards from your opponent. So a lot to like about this list. Definitely check it out if this is the kind of playstyle that you enjoy. And we're not done with the spice yet, because we're going to be looking at the 6th place list from the Inc Invitational 10 case, which is from Matthew Hornbaker, and it is an Amber Ruby Mufasa list. And like the Emerald Sapphire list, this was another ink combination that did really well at the triple deck constructed, again because there's no steel decks to worry about. And this is a Mufasa list that's really building on what was doing well in sets 3 and 4, and we see that with the cards like Pongo, which were doing really well back then, and the Prince Eric. But this deck actually did get some really fun new toys as well. So there's the new legendary Goofy that allows you to remove 1 damage from all of your characters and ready any that you did remove damage from. Since you're going to be playing cards like Mulan and Mother Gothel, all of these are prime targets to be able to ready using this ability, so it just gives them some extra utility in addition to being targets there for your Rapunzel. We've got the 3 copies of Mulan, which is kind of acting as a bit of control in this deck. The 2 copies of the Big Sisu as well. If you flip either of those off of a Mufasa, it's going to be really devastating for your opponent. 1 copy of Wreck-It Ralph, allowing you to find a princess. In most cases, you're going to be looking for something like Rapunzel. Then it can just help you not only gain lore, but find some of the key pieces you need. I know a lot of people are fond of Mufasa, and with so many questions over whether he's even going to be in the game with the reprints of Fabled next set, this might be your last chance to try him out. So if you enjoy this type of lists, then this could be a good list for you to pick. Next up, we're looking at this 3rd place list from Braden Bodish at the Inc Invitational, and this is an Emerald Steel discard list, not using the Beyond the Horizon that we saw having success in the winning list from last week, but building on a deck list that was doing really well in the previous set. The new card in here is the 2 copies of Chip. This is a character that will force your opponent to discard a card when you play him. With so many actions and songs in the metagame at the moment, he acts a lot like a Lucifer. A lot of players would just hold on to an action to discard that when you play Lucifer, but Chip is cheaper, he's got better stats, and he's inkable, so all of those things make him probably a much better pick in these decks. And we do see Morph coming back into these lists because you've got the Floodborn Pete, who is such a powerhouse in a metagame where there are a lot of decks relying on songs. Then he's just a great way to shut those down. There's also the 3 copies of Beast, so 2 really great shift targets to drop on top of your Morph. But if you did enjoy the Beyond the Horizon version of Emerald Steel, then we have this list from Jar P4 that took 4th place at the Lorcana 5k. Very similar list here with a lot of the same tools, but yeah, you're really going to be looking to set up that Beyond the Horizon to rip all of the cards out of your opponent's hand and then finish them off with something like a Sudden Shell. And of course, we've seen how good the synergy is with Beyond the Horizon and your Prince John. You can just basically draw your whole deck if you're able to set it up, and we saw last week just how powerful that is. Next up, we have the first of 2 Ruby Sapphire lists, and this is the Maui Shark DKP version from Nicholas Quirin, who took 3rd place at the Ludofest, so huge tournament, really great result. And really not much new to mention about this deck list. It's still going to be employing that strategy that does really, really well, which is to set up the Maui Shark as soon as you can, which puts your opponent in a kind of stalemate position where they really don't want to quest with their characters, because he will then start recurring those actions. So you can just chip away at lore with your actions whilst he's on board, and then eventually setting up your McDuck mana and looking to protect that at all costs with all of the different characters in this deck and all of the different removal options in this deck. So we know it's a list that does very well. It's a list that continues to do well, and again, just showing you don't need new cards to still be doing well in the metagame. And then we have another Ruby Sapphire list. This is the more item leaning version from Jose Angel Mateo, who took 3rd place at the 4K Enchanted Showdown. And another list not adding anything else from the Reign of Jafar, because you don't need it when you've got such a strong card. And unlike the Maui Shark version, which is relying on Maui and your actions, this is instead going to be a deck that's going to be looking to build up a big advantage with all of these items. Instead, Maurice's Workshop just becomes such a great draw engine with all of the low cost items in this deck. Then you you're basically paying 1 to draw a card each time you play one of those, which is really, really powerful. You can play these items for free with Tamatoa and then use the ink to draw additional cards. And then once you've set up that critical mass of items, then you can play your Tamatoa So Shiny, target him with your Lucky Dime, and then close the game like that. So this version of the deck list tends to do a little bit better into Amber Steel. If you're expecting a lot of Amber Steel at your local metagame, you may consider this deck instead. Next up, we're going to look at Amethyst Ruby and the 7th place list from David Gardiner from the Inc Invitational. And actually a very interesting take on Ruby Amethyst here. We've seen decks trying to run this Hades, who allows you to deal 2 damage to a character of yours to draw 2 cards. Not a great card if you're expecting a lot of Ruby decks, but a very good card if you're expecting a lot of Steel decks, because his 3/6 stat line does make him quite difficult to remove, and then you're also drawing cards as well. You've got the natural synergy in there with the Queen of Hearts. You can put the damage on her, which then buffs her up to be even more powerful. And then also the 4 copies of Madame Medusa, who allows you to put 2 damage on a chosen character of yours. That then allows you to return chosen character with 2 cost or less to their player's hand. So helps you with that early game, which can sometimes be a bit of a struggle with a deck like this. But especially with all of those aggressive Amber Steel deck lists around with Churner Dogs around, then this will allow you to slow them down a lot there as well. So very cool list here if you don't want to go for something strictly traditional when it comes to Ruby Amethyst. Another very interesting list here is the more evasive Ruby Amethyst list, but also a lot of spice in this one as well. This deck has the 3 copies of the 2-cost Mulan, and then hopefully enabling you to set up the Shift Mulan later in the game. After that, it's got the Maui Shark, of course, because of course he has that natural synergy with Peter Pan, allowing you to play your actions and recur your actions. And then also one of Mateus's favorite cards in this deck list, and another deck running the Prince Eric. Another really good card that is just so good into Steel matchups, because if your opponent does remove him, even with the song, then he's going to be allowing you to banish a character. So you can also use him offensively if you need to. 2 copies of Hypnotic Strength here as well. Great if you need to use it on your own characters to challenge down a location or a character with more willpower. But as we know, also a great tech card if you're expecting a lot of illusions in your local metagames. And I should say great job to Usman, who took 6th place at the Ludofest with this list and really innovating, which is super, super nice. And then a little bit more like the Ruby Amethyst evasive list we've been seeing. This is from Mascaractus, who took 6th place at the Disney Lorcana Quest Tour number 4. And using a lot more of the typical cards we've been seeing in lists like this. We've got the 3 copies of Pegasus, again natural synergy with Peter Pan, making him useful into the later game, the 2 copies of Iago, and another deck list introducing that 1 copy of Monstro, just to give you a little bit of extra removal in toward the late game, allowing you to cut down on some of the Uninkables, because you do start to run into some really high numbers of Uninkables with these cards in these deck lists. So great job to them as well. That's it for another week of the meta. I'm really happy to say that it is looking a little bit more diverse, even if Amber Steel is sitting there on the top of the mountain. As I said, definitely check out 20 Law Pro over on Twitch to watch the tournament of the Triple Deck Constructed, because genuinely some of the most fun Lorcana I've been able to watch recently, and just seeing so much variety. Lots of fun decks, lots of hopefully inspiration for you if you don't want to stick to the same meta decks. If you enjoyed this video, please do be sure to hit the like button as it helps us out, and subscribe for future meta reports as well as a bunch of other videos. A shout out again to the sponsor to this video, HeavyPlay. Remember, you can visit them at heavyplay.com and use the discount code Inkborn10 to get 10% off your whole order. And finally, the last big shout out to our YouTube members. Thank you so much for the support. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or just want to find out more, you can hit the join button down below. You get a bunch of perks, including early access to some of our videos, so definitely check it out if you're interested. And with that said, until the next time, happy questing.